Welcome to the Bitcoin Marketing Podcast, where we highlight the best and brightest in the Bitcoin ecosystem. This episode is brought to you by BTC Prague and Bitcoin Advisors, and most recently by Bitvault. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Uncle Rockstar, who needs no introduction. Hello, Uncle. How are you?
Hello, Danny. I'm great because it's the podcast for brightest people. I think I'm the brightest, right? So, pleasure to be joining and setting an example of how bright you need to be in order to join you for an interview.
That's actually a really funny play on words, because one of the questions that I had for you is, who do you think is alive today that knows the most about Bitcoin?
Well, it's not me, definitely. What's interesting in Bitcoin is that a lot of people know a lot about it from different perspectives. So if I would need to pick one person, I would always go back to Satoshi, but he's not alive. When it comes to who are maybe the best, say best developer, that would be a good one. Who is the developer that knows the most about Bitcoin? Do you have a favorites, Danny?
Well, the name that came to mind was Marty Malmi, but there might be others who fit that are up there with him, like Adam and you and other people. But I was more curious who you would put up.
When it comes to developers, two names come to my mind, especially in the light of the recent debates. So maybe we can go with names of SIPA and then Luke Dash Jr. So we represent the both camps, right?
So we represent both camps.
So yeah, I would go with those names.
I definitely want to get to that conversation a little bit later, because the conversation that I wanted to have with you would be maybe to go in the direction of making the case for Bitcoin and the BTC ticker, and talk a little bit, like take a little path down memory lane and talk a little bit about how we got here, so that we can have that conversation about the filters and the up return at the end with some context. How do you feel about that?
Perfect.
All right.
Let's do it. And sorry I didn't give you one name, but I gave you three names.
3 is more than I could ever ask for. All right. Let's look at this timeline. So, from my research and from what I have learned in my time here, at the beginning in Bitcoin, it was a little bit less polemic. But please correct me if I'm wrong, because I feel like there was a little bit less fighting. And then, as we got into 2015 with Bitcoin XT and big blocks, and that fight, when that fight started, and we departed from legacy addresses with SegWit, like, why don't you tell us from your perspective how that story unfolded?
Yeah, I mean, it can also be a good introduction for, you said I don't need introduction, but for people that don't know why this silhouette with fiat on fire is here, to introduce, yeah, what I've done. It's like I've been in Bitcoin for quite a long now. Like, it's even when Satoshi launched it on initially on mailing lists, I was big into cypherpunk philosophy like my whole life, and saw Bitcoin start from that. But I always thought governments were gonna ban it, right? That usually a lot of people get caught in that trap. But once I saw that politicians are even buying Bitcoin, and this is back in the days you're mentioning, like 2012, 2013, 2014, I knew, we're going to be successful with this will happen. And my participation really in Bitcoin starts then, but I had different identities. Like, I was opening accounts on Reddit and Bitcoin Talk. Yeah, like a lot of Bitcoiners nowadays. There are people like, say, Mr. Hodl. He's been around for so long on X and Twitter. And 2017 is when Uncle Rockstar Developer, me, that identity is established, as I was sick and tired of the fighting of block size wars that you mentioned. And since then, I've done BTC Pay Server with Nicholas Dory. I've helped Jack Mallers start Strike. So I've been in strike for 2019 to 2023, helped establish that company. And now, what Uncle Rockstar Developer is doing mostly is taking care of his nephews and nieces, ever growing through these interviews. And then, guess I'm an old guy. I'm talking about history. So what you're saying, there was less fighting. There always has been fighting in Bitcoin. It's just the scale of the fighting, right? We weren't at Bitcoin at 100K back then. And also, people took us way less serious. There's a bunch of weirdos on Bitcoin Talk discussing this asset that's $200 a coin. Once Bitcoin hit 1,000, we all thought, okay, the good saying like Bitcoin is going to the moon. We were already at the moon at Bitcoin at $1,000.
I get it. I totally get it.
But it's the thing with number goes up, but so does greed. So I would say there were always fighting, and fighting is part of the Bitcoin. It's part of the establishing consensus. It was just like less of a fighting, less of a scale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what did you guys fight about, like pre-SegWit?
What was being fought? Well, SegWit is that first big fork, right?
Mm-hmm.
But make no mistake, like there was fighting before SegWit that has set up even block size wars. When you look at developers that were involved in Bitcoin Core before block size wars, with Gavin Andreessen was lead developer on Bitcoin after Satoshi left, right? Satoshi gave him the keys to the repo. But then what happened was, as Gavin was getting closer to Craig Wright, and then when he posted that Craig Wright is actually Satoshi, his permissions to access GitHub repository were taken, right? So there was that fighting, developer fighting.
So like the Craig Wright situation was right before SegWit.
It was like if you look into the history, it was the whole when Craig Wright even appeared, he was like, "I'm Satoshi," and then there was a fight, big fight, like whether he is Satoshi or not. So people can look into history.
That was unfortunate that he got caught up in that like trap.
Yeah, and this is where people that are, for example, not familiar with block size wars, they can go on YouTube and search "My Trust in You is Broken." It's a documentary on how BTC Pay server started. Great 42-minute documentary that will give you a lot of context on how block size wars have set up BTC Pay.
So what do you think about the people who say that introducing SegWit and moving away from legacy addresses basically made Bitcoin not Bitcoin?
Well, what makes Bitcoin the Bitcoin is proof of work, right? So as long as you are on the chain with the most proof of work, by definition, you are using like the Bitcoin. And this is where I would point all the people who are in doubt. They're like, "Oh, this is not fair. This is not really like." Forget all about that. Just look where is the most cumulative proof of work, and that's how you know whether you are on true reality or your own personal fork of reality. So yeah, use that as a criteria.
Okay, like moving forward and on the same line of thought, SegWit was introduced through the user-activated soft fork in like a fight against the miners, because the miners knew that allowing Lightning to go forward would lower their fees, right? Is that kind of what happened?
No, it was way more complex than that. The big thing that was a factor for some miners, but for a lot of miners repeated, repeated the mistakes of past, and the mistake I even see now in this op return debate. You don't go with the truth, you go with social connections. So, you're friends with this person, and this person is a friends with this other person. What happened back then was that a lot of people that were leading the companies, they joined that New York agreement. You remember that? So I can look it up for people that are not familiar. But
The
basically,
New York Agreement was the miners' agreement.
well, it wasn't just miners, it was a lot of companies that were on top of Bitcoin coming together and signing an agreement of what Bitcoin will be. And then that actually fueled a revolt of Bitcoiners around the world because they weren't in that closed door room, right? To sign it was companies that were involved with Bitcoin, they were deciding for people what Bitcoin is.
Yeah, it's a total mafia, and it's like
This,
a hidden hand. In Bitcoin, it shouldn't be a hidden hand. It should be people and, like you say, open debate.
yes, but this goes in the line of what I was saying. Like people do not go with the truth; they go with the social connections they're part of. So it very quickly becomes, "Hey, Danny, you and me, we're our group, but there's them over there that we need to defeat." So, or we don't need to defeat. We just don't want them involved. They are outside of our group, and that's where our lizard brain takes over. It's like us versus them and that other group. And I think a large part of that is also what's fueling current op return debate, where Bitcoin Core developers and Bitcoin Core, they are developing that tribalistic mentality where it's like us developers, we're so much more intelligent than these plebs outside. They don't understand our technical genius. Let's ignore them and their feedback. So and that's what's triggering a lot of Bitcoiners is because if you got into Bitcoin, you didn't get into Bitcoin in order to replace one elite group with another. Just that's what's really terrible for a lot of people, and Uncle completely understands it. We gotta go beyond this problem and resolve it.
I mean, when I first got into Bitcoin, I felt exactly what you describe as a problem now. But then I kind of tried to embrace the toxic maximalism in terms of like what it does do, which is try to protect people from the scams. But it does have like a dark underbelly where like I didn't feel safe asking questions that to me were genuine questions, and I received answers even in like educational environments that were very off-putting and more like just like silencing instead of having a genuine academic conversation. And I do find that really frustrating because it makes it slower for people to understand and to get on board with the ideas. The ideas might be great and they want to get on board, and that's why they're asking.
Yeah, and what you don't want is you don't want a dogma, right? You don't want to parrot certain words and without understanding the meaning behind them. But there are also great one-liners that will help you once you truly understand them. Like once you truly understand, stay humble, stack sats, you certain days you may not be into it or you may doubt it, but historically it has proven itself, right? Being a toxic Bitcoin maximalist and say attacking shitcoiners, okay, like what's behind that? Why did we go down that path? And this is where I would always argue, because a lot of people identify me as a toxic Bitcoin maximalist. Even when that was really popular back in 2019, 2020, I kept telling people is like I'm not toxic Bitcoin maximalist, like I'm Bitcoiner. And I understand that unfortunately you cannot have 100% purity, right? In this world, people will always fork. You can't have pristine, vacuum clean space. It's like there will always be someone that will jump in and twist it in their direction. So Uncle has been saying for a number of years now, like there will always be shitcoins. It's you just gotta see like when you're spending way too much time trying to pull people out of shitcoins rather than staying humble stacking sats yourself, because you can't wish more for people than they wish for themselves. Always keep that in mind. You cannot, like, if someone wants thinks that they will invest in this ape coin and it's going to make them hacks like tax, you can't save that person. Like, you gotta let that person do that, and then 5 years later they're going to come back and say, oh, if only I listened to you and just bought bitcoin, I lost all my money. Like, you gotta let people go through that cycle, and you gotta focus on people that actually want to hear from you. Because what you say about education, there are a lot of people now joining bitcoin, and there are people that if you invest time in talking with them, figuring things out, like, they're going to be better off and you'll be better off as an educator. So focus on that rather than going on X and yelling at people like stop buying shit coins and being a toxic bitcoin maximalist.
Yeah, I've never been able to. I am not really that involved in social media.
Unlike Uncle, yes.
I think that's an ability that some people have, and that's not an ability I have. But I do see like the pros and cons of the situation. Okay, but bringing it back to the political situation, let's see if what we skipped. Okay, so I still need a little bit more clarity. So if it wasn't the fear of the fees, so it was like also a political thing. People got upset at the political thing, plus and they were doing that group. But why did they have that New York agreement? Because they didn't want their fees to be messed
Okay.
up.
So as I say, like, you're right. Fees were part of the criteria. The block size was the biggest thing, obviously, right? It's called block size wars. All those New York agreement signees, they wanted to accept the compromise of SegWit, but then go with double the blocks so that there is more on-chain footprint, right? For there is space for those on-chain transactions to get into block at lower fees. But what was pushed back from the other side, like smaller block side, was if we do that, we will not be able to run Bitcoin Core nodes on smaller devices like Raspberry Pis. Block size the size of the blockchain will increase much more rapidly. There is no need for that. Because you gotta store a blockchain in perpetuity. Like, you gotta store it forever. And this is what people who are advocating against big blocks were talking about. Unfortunately, the companies that signed New York agreement disregarded this, and hence the conflict was set up, where the most extreme part of that faction with Roger Ver and all of them, like Coinbase, they have set for SegWit 2x activation. BitPay also set up for this, and this is where BTC Pay server started, where Nicolas Dorier, in response to BitPay's blog post, oh, we're going to update our merchants to SegWit 2x, Nicolas Dorier famously posted, "This is lies. My trust in you is broken. I'll make you obsolete," and kickstarted BTC Pay server.
Okay, got it. So SegWit was what was activated, and SegWit 2x was SegWit, but with double the block size.
Exactly.
So yeah, and then that camp eventually became Bitcoin Cash. But I want to move on
Or
to Lightning.
Bcash. Sorry, gotta give credit to Carvalho. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Lightning. Okay, what do you think about Lightning and fees? Because what I understand about Lightning, and the biggest issue that I understand comes with Lightning, is the fact that in order to be able to enforce good behavior, you need to be able to force settle a payment and like a channel, like force close a channel. But if on chain transactions are too expensive, then your ability to enforce good behavior on Lightning decreases. What do you think about scalability? Do you see Bitcoin as being cash, peer-to-peer, cash that is actually like low fee, second layer, still feasible? Like, what do you think about this problem of scalability?
I mean, what I think about the problem of scalability is this. We can look into mempool space, and you see this, 1 sat per V byte, 1. So Lightning works, right? And this is proof that Lightning works because now we have not millions or tens of millions, we have billions of dollars being sent daily between people on Bitcoin network. Now it's not on-chain transactions; they're like Lightning transactions. So Lightning works. It's just that people like drama or they like pulling the conversation in the direction of, it's not a Bitcoin transaction, it's a Lightning transaction, whatever. As long as it settles a transfer of Bitcoin from one entity to another, I'm happy. Because for me, Bitcoin is always it was always about money. It is now about money, and in future it will be about money. And it will be all about, can we help better transfer value between humans, machines eventually as well, and can we facilitate that in the best way possible? Because one of the biggest problems we have in the world today is that money is not flowing from those that have a lot to those that don't. And there are regulatory barriers, there are political barriers. If you're in a certain country, you cannot participate in global commerce. It's terrible. We gotta resolve that issue and keep moving forward. Use Bitcoin as a tool for transfer of value between people.
Okay, I agree with you 100% with the idea that Lightning works today. That today,
Mm-hmm.
Lightning works for the user base and for the fees, it works. But I guess the real underlying question is, do you think that the fees will naturally stay low in the future? Or if the fees go up, are we required to have OPCAT or OPCTV? And where do you stand in that conversation?
I think the biggest thing there is to understand that Lightning is not a silver bullet. So there will be different protocols for settling in Bitcoin between people, and they're actively being developed. As you say, like CTV, supposedly it can help with scaling. I'm still not persuaded in that. Opcat is more of a joke. It's kind of showcase of whether a certain group can force adding of opcode to Bitcoin's code base. Um, I would more look into protocols like Arc and whether they're going to, help. Yeah, Arc. And then one thing that's, why are you laughing?
Because I love like you're like very matter of fact because you have a lot of knowledge, so you can speak with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of experience and matter of fact about.
Conviction, yeah. No, I also am really interested in seeing how the whole stablecoin craziness will unfold, because that's something that when I observe, especially South America, there is a lot of stablecoin usage. And stablecoins are what actually helped a lot of shitcoins survive, right? If you have Tron, if you have Ethereum, Solana, USDT on those chains, like it's what's helping those old other blockchains survive. If there were no stable coins, all of those chains would be dead by now. So but for Bitcoin now that you're having stable coins on Lightning, you're having stable coins as another layer on top of different technologies on Bitcoin. I'm quite curious to see how that will unfold, and how can we use stable coins as a tool to onboard more people onto Bitcoin, because long term, 20 years, 50 years, anyone that's using stablecoins will realize one big fact, that stablecoins are CBDCs. And if you have a stablecoin, your account can be blocked.
Mhm.
So you can use stablecoins to transact, but do you really want to save in stablecoins? Uncle will advise no. But a lot of people are not persuaded because of volatility, so something to keep in mind.
Okay, but when you say stable coins are CBDCs, do you mean like so I have two questions. The first one is, when you said stable coins on Bitcoin, do you mean like the RGB protocol? You like the
For
color?
example,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I do agree that the Latin population is particularly like susceptible to that, because then And the reason I think it helps stablecoins so much is because people can hold their money on the stablecoin without fear, which is ironic, but in any case, a stablecoin without fear, and then they input into the different in and out of the different altcoins. Is it allows them that flexibility that they otherwise would not have, because the fear of onboarding and outboarding would keep them away.
Yeah, and it's like fear of profits as well, right? If they held that balance not in stable coins but in Bitcoin, they would got like 5 times more. But this is why Uncle is here on this podcast. I'm here to scam you into profits, scam you into Bitcoin, so you believe more into it and live a better life.
Okay, but question. So even if your stable coin is on Lightning, it can still be seized because it's ultimately controlled by one group company.
Well, need to, I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't researched Lightning as much, but you always have an issuer. That's the problem with stablecoin. So stablecoin. So if issuer says no, I will not convert your little tokens into Bitcoin, what do you do? You're like, you need to go and submit the documentation that you're not a criminal, and please, big entity, change my little tokens that you issued back into better money that Bitcoin is.
Okay. I think that was a very thorough um, like walk down memory lane that gives us a good context as to where we are now, because now we're moving into Taproot and Stratum v2 and core version 30. So before we get into the filter war, explain to me, like, talk to me about Taproot, why it hasn't taken off the way it should, how come you can do everything that people are upset about that you can do in v30, all that stuff.
Oh, well, I'm not the best person to talk about all of that, but one thing I will say about Taproot though is protocol development is hard because you can develop protocol and provide all these beautiful bells and whistles. It's only when they're practically applied to some kind of application service that they can really thrive. And this is where there is a big difference between us developers as well. Like I've mostly spent my time in Bitcoin working on application layer, like with BTC Pay Server, with Strike, with advising, mentoring people, companies. It was always about how do we get Bitcoin to reach more and more people through practical applications, which is why I also fly around the world and help at the conferences and events if they want to accept Bitcoin. So I think with Taproot, the biggest thing will be okay, when some kind of application that depends on Taproot gains in popularity, we'll see more usage. And now, as for Bitcoin Core version 30, I don't know, Danny. If I start talking about that, I'll go way more into political part. Where to me, Bitcoin Core version 30 is more and more becoming this big release. We're gonna get on like 1031, that date when Satoshi also was releasing the white paper on Bitcoin. And to me, it more will be kind of declaration of independence of developers in Bitcoin Core from the rest of the network, unfortunately. So I don't know. Hopefully, I'm wrong, but I wish the cooler heads would prevail and that we get back to the situation where more developers are listening to user feedback, hearing out different Bitcoiners, and then use the knowledge, skills, wisdom that they have to actually implement things on behalf of the users rather than get lost in their personal interests or special interests.
Well, I mean, part of me thinks that it's a natural evolution, that there's kind of cracks and it's kind of crumbling, that the development monopoly is kind of crumbling because Bitcoin is not designed to have a development monopoly, in the sense that it's great to have a reference implementation, but at the same time, the code is your vote. So if you want to have a voice, that's how you express yourself, and having multiple perspectives is healthy.
Yeah, but again, it's a position of power. right? If I am in position of power, I am using that power based on my judgment. So I may say, hey, Danny is wrong. I just will not facilitate her wrong views. And if I'm in position of power, I can do that. I can cut you off, Danny. So the thing is also like we're in a very complex situation right now. Like Bitcoin has been having so much success that people that are in position of power, they say, hey, I've done so much and for Bitcoin and for Bitcoiners. And I haven't been properly appreciated and rewarded. That's something that I experience a lot as a developer. A lot of people see me see my contributions and my code, but they also see my reach on socials and other things. And they're like, why should Rockstar be this influential? I have done more than him. I should have bigger reach than him. So yeah, so then it becomes really the kind of ego thing, not technical thing or what's the best technical solution. And unfortunately, that's where we are, Danny.
Well, because Bitcoin, they say that you don't have to trust anybody, but that's not totally true in the sense that we are all trusting really smart people. And those people who we trust have a little bit of power over us because you can put whatever filter you want. You can have your node relay whatever you want. The question is, do you have the abilities to write the code to make your node do that? And in that, people like there is a degree of trust and there is a degree of like dependency, and that dependency can be taken advantage of, and that's I think where we're at. What
Yeah,
happened there?
I like. Do you even want to spend time as a developer coding on someone's behalf? That's a question. It's like I, with my technical knowledge and skills, do I even want to spend a second in my day to be like, hey, yes, this would be useful for Danny. This will be useful for a number of Bitcoiners, but I don't find it interesting. I will not spend my time on this. It's just I find something completely different interesting. So I will not code on your behalf. If you want to do it, learn to code. So yeah, it's interesting system, interesting situation, interesting dynamics. From my side, I still don't see better alternatives. You know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and there are a lot of developers that are doing great job. Unfortunately, so I would maybe switch a conversation a little bit. Like let's not focus on the worst examples. Like there are amazing examples of people that over the years have been coding both what users want and what's also like interesting to them. One of those examples is my fellow colleague on BTC Pay server, Nicola Dorier. So let's talk about that rather than bad examples.
For sure, we can definitely focus on the positive. And I do think is that to me, in some way, what is happening is not negative in the sense that it is within the rules of the Bitcoin game. So we might not like it, it might be immoral, it might be mean, but it's still within the rules of the game. So I understand that they're in a position of power. So like where do you stand? What would you like what is it? Let's because we've talked about like what's happening politically, but we didn't really even talk about what's the situation technically. Talk to us about the situation at a technical level. Like
Yeah.
what is the debate? Where do you stand? What
I
do you want to
mean,
see happen?
Uncle will always be standing with the people. I will always be standing with individuals and their expansion of individual freedom, their own self actualization. So, me, in this whole debate on op return, the biggest thing is always if you as a user you want to configure something, you should have ability to configure it. If something was a default and is now being changed to different value, that is changing behavior of the network. You as a developer, you can figure out technical jargon to justify everything, but if your technical decision is changing the nature of the network, then there is a degree of responsibility that you should carry. And in this case, what's changing is that previously, if you have the network of Bitcoin core nodes, right, and you send a transaction that has op return bigger than the 83 bytes, that network of nodes will reject the transaction. What's changing in Bitcoin Core 30 is that that network of nodes will now accept that transaction. There are a number of justifications being used for this. Like one of them is because this network of node now propagates this transaction as valid, and it is valid in terms of consensus of Bitcoin, like the mining consensus, not mempool network policies. Now that transaction is propagating through the network, and small miners have access to it. It's not just the miners that would accept the transaction through their private services. So this is used as a justification. But as I say, you are changing the behavior of the network, and it's obvious from the online discourse that majority of Bitcoin network does not want to participate in relaying these transactions because they're non-monetary transactions. They're not helping Bitcoin flow from those that have it to a lot of it to those that have less.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the nutshell of the debate from technical side.
Well, because there's ordinals and there's inscriptions,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them stays in the UTXO set forever, and the other one doesn't, right?
Well, ordinals are inscriptions, and yes, ordinals stay in UTXO set forever right now. Maybe we can work on network of Bitcoin core nodes not keeping it forever. There are technical solutions that would enable that, but I'm telling you, ordinals are retarded. And one of the feature of that is that they have crazy side effects, which is like everyone now needs to hold something in UTXO said because of them.
Yeah, because like this doesn't bloat the actual
UTXO.
blockchain in the sense that we continue to be at 4 MB plus witnesses or whatnot.
Well, no. Op return is bloating blockchain, but as you say, like it's not bloating the UTXO set. The problem is that ordinals will not switch to op return because it's 4 times more expensive to inscribe that way than inscribing through witness data. So it's another technical thing that when witness discount was originally conceived by the developers in Bitcoin Core, they were expecting that people are only going to put the witness data in there. So they provided them with 4 times the discount. And another side effect of this was that blocks would go from 1 megabyte to potentially 4 megabytes if you have a lot of witness data. But fast forward, what, like 9 years, no one is using that witness data for cryptographic signatures. They're using it for inscribing nonsense and stroking their vanity. So, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Is that there's differences in the degree of how damaging things are.
Yes.
So the debate is that if you remove the limit of the op return, then you will have very large transactions floating around the nodes. But those transactions, do they push out like financial transactions that have lower fees?
Like that's what we will be seeing more and more. Especially another thing we haven't mentioned is Cytria's involvement in this whole situation. I mean, you're familiar with Cytria or no?
No.
No, not at all. Oh my God. Well, people can research Cytria, and it's basically this another of U.S. startups. It's well funded, and they want to essentially anchor some of their level 2 craziness in Bitcoin, and they were going to use those fake witness signatures and whatnot. But since op return is now being increased, they will be using that hopefully. So they will not bloat the UTXO set. However, they're going to produce tons of shit coins, inscriptions, other stuff on in their blockchain that will be anchored into Bitcoin's blockchain. And as they do that, of course, they're driving the fee market up, and eventually they will be a factor in pricing out monetary transactions. So, yeah, let's see how game theory plays out there.
Well, it is just like a little bit with the sword against the wall, because if you don't give them the space, they'll blow your UTXO. And if you do give them the space, then it's going to be the Wild West mempool.
Yeah, we do a little promotion for Saitria. So, yeah, let's see how it plays out. We have quite a future ahead of us, Danny.
You want to know what's the funniest question that I thought I wanted to ask you? It was, what was
But
some like shower Bitcoin thought that you've had that you haven't shared with anybody about like where you see Bitcoin going, and it's like so out there that you haven't wanted to share with anybody?
well, I don't know. I think I'm well expressed. The thing is also having a dedicated identity for Bitcoin creates a situation where I shower, I'm in my private identity, so I don't think about Bitcoin that much. No, if there is one thought that Uncle wants to communicate, that I just hope that Bitcoin allows everyone the degree of freedom that I got. I was very lucky that my proof of work in Bitcoin over the years through coding on top of Bitcoin, doing BTC Pay server, doing Strike, helping various people. In the end, Bitcoin has rewarded me so much that most of my time now is spent joining interviews like this and hopefully preaching the message of stay humble, stack sats, focus on your proof of work, follow your passion in unique way in Bitcoin. Because again, this is where a lot of us developers are guilty of focusing too much on our technical brilliance. Like there's many people that are non-developers and they're contributing immensely to Bitcoin in their own unique ways. So that's the beauty of system that Bitcoin is that you have certain skills, experience, passions, and you can use that to push Bitcoin forward. You don't need to be submitting commits to Bitcoin Core repo on GitHub. You can be an educator. You can be, as you say, marketing person, even though you'll be look down upon. You're like, oh, you're influencer or whatnot. Listen, if you're influencing people toward better form of money that helps them live a better life, gets them off this crazy fiat system that we all have been experiencing, like the craziness of central banks, politicians. Again, especially in South America, when you look at the history of politicians in Argentina, insane. You look at Maduro in Venezuela, like all these people are like, oh, we're geniuses that are misunderstood. It's that Americans are like oppressing us and whatnot. It's like, no, if you can't lead people to better life, like, okay, step down. It's a lot about you in the end as well. You're protecting your position. So step down, let a better system naturally arise. And the better system is definitely like Bitcoin, which is proven by people that lived on Bitcoin standard over the last decade. So going back to what I opened this with, whatever unique skills, experience you have applied to push Bitcoin forward. And again, scam people into profits. That's Uncle's motto.
Well, I get the sense from what you just said that you
Mm-hmm.
truly believe that Bitcoin can contribute to protect and improve human rights and freedom across the world. Like you think of Bitcoin as not just money, but a tool that empowers us, right?
Yes, well, money is nothing but a tool in the end. And it's probably the best tool that we humans have invented in our search for truth. So this is something I philosophize quite often about is you look at the fact that every civilization that scaled needed to invent money. in order to scale. Tribes, civilizations that didn't invent money, what happened with them is that members of that tribe, of that civilization, would get so overwhelmed with information that they couldn't deduce like what is the truth, the actual truth. So you would say have a rise of a religious caste elite that would then waste the resources of that tribe on their like religious things. People would not get a better standard of living. On the other hand, you look at civilizations that adopted money and used money as a tool for like interhuman connection, exchange of value. That is what helped people collaborate, create more, create technological progress as well. The thing is also, I love to say, I actually love fiat. When you look at the technological development over the last 50, 60, 70 years, what is now like 71.
The industrial.
So we get like what, 54 years since we went off the gold standard. Technological progress has been great, but the problem is we have fiat as a technology is now over its limits. If the problem is that politicians have figured it out, they're like, I'll get to the power and then I will print money for good of you all. It's like I will not take much, maybe a few trillion in pocket of me and my special interest. So what we have realized is we outgrew the technology and we now lost this tool, this money. Like that's what people also sense when they're like money is corrupted. Money as a tool is not corrupted, but this iteration, fiat money, it is absolutely corrupted. The problem is that that corruption is taking away ability of a lot of people to truth seek. It doesn't matter how good you are as individual. What matters more is like where do you live. So, as someone that has immigrated to US, my net worth has skyrocketed not because I became like 10 times better individual. It's just that I moved to US. And if we're to continue with technological progress,
Yes.
if we are to discover new truths, we need a better money. And you're saying, hey, I believe that Bitcoin is that. Absolutely. Bitcoin is that. And the more people realize that, the more people switch over to Bitcoin, the better we will be. You don't need to listen it to cypherpunk bright guy with bunch of fiat on the flame. Put Jeff Boot in your listening queue, put Preston Pish, put some other like Sailor, listen to Sailor as a Bitcoin evangelist, and all of them explain this in more detail. Alex Gladstein, especially when it comes to perspective of Bitcoin and human rights.
Yes, I agree, but none of them are developers.
Yeah, well, we all have our flaws, but yeah. No, and I mean, if you are a developer, especially, and you are looking at how you can contribute to Bitcoin, find Uncle. That's also one thing that I'm doing a lot lately is helping developers escape fiat jobs and do more open source work, get funding for them. So get in touch with Uncle and we can have fun together at the conferences.
That's good because it's important to have diverging voices. And one of the hardest things about being a Bitcoin developer is that you may be very smart, but you need to be in the in to get paid. And so, if you can help diverging voices have the financial support to be able to make proposals, that's the biggest thing you can do for the people in general, for the general.
I'm doing it so now people know and let's see. But when you do come to Uncle, come with some kind of proof of work. Go on GitHub, send me your commits, and let's push Bitcoin forward together.
Well, thank you for this trip down memory lane. It was really wonderful to get your insight from your first time experiencing like the different moments that Bitcoin has gone through and bringing into context the conversations that are happening today with respect to like everything that has happened before. It's been wonderful. I am really, from the heart, grateful that you joined us and that you shared your knowledge with us.
Anytime, Danny, and thank you for inviting me. It's been a true pleasure for myself as well.
All righty. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. And don't miss the next episodes of Bitfluencer of the Bitcoin Marketing Podcast.